Yep. Okay, great. All right, so we've officially started. So before I really begin getting into the event and introducing our panelists, I'm going to have our Spanish interpreters, Roberto and Catalina, just briefly explain how to join this call, or excuse me, how to join the interpretation line so that you have the Spanish and English interpretation.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. My name is Catalina and Roberto will be also interpreting. Yo soy Catalina y Roberto también va a estar interpretando. We're going to have a separate conference call line for interpretation both in English and Spanish. So unless you understand both English and Spanish, you'll need to join this interpretation line as well as the Zoom to be able to hear interpretation whenever the language switches. Entonces, vamos a tener una línea de interpretación por separado a esta llamada de Zoom. Esta es para escuchar la información en inglés y en español. Entonces, a no ser de que entiendan estos dos idiomas, van a necesitar unirse a esta llamada por separado, además del Zoom. Cuando se esté escuchando el idioma que entienden, pueden quitarse el audífono, bajarle el volumen, pero cuando cambie el idioma, pueden escuchar la interpretación a través de esta llamada. So, when you're hearing the language that you understand in Zoom, you could just take the phone away or take your headphone off or just lower the volume in the conference call line. But then once the language switches, then you could kind of like listen to the conference call to understand what the presenters are saying. La línea de llamada para... acabamos de poner la información en la casilla de chat para los diferentes números, dependiendo del país del que estén llamando. Entonces, para ver las opciones, pueden mirar en el chat de Zoom para saber qué número llamar. So, to know which number to call, you could refer to the chat on the Zoom right now. That's where you could see, depending on the country that you're calling from, which will be your number to dial for the interpretation line. Y solo para recordarles a los panelistas que por favor, por motivo de interpretación, hablen un poco más despacio. Y si nos ven haciendo esto, eso significa que por favor hablen más despacio. And lastly, just a reminder to all presenters today to please, for the purpose of interpretation, please speak at a moderate pace. And if you see someone doing this hand signal, which is from your hands from the middle out, that means please slow down. Thank you. Gracias. You're on mute, Jen.
Thank you. So I was saying thank you. We also have ASL interpretation today that's being done by Paris, who is signing now, and we'll also have Rodney doing some signing. The best way to see the ASL interpretation is in the Zoom window, click on speaker view. And so that way you can see the speakers better, and then you'll be able to also see the sign language interpreters more clearly. Any links or other important information we'll be sharing in the Zoom chat as we go on, and possibly Facebook if we can get connected to the live stream. We're recording this event though, so we're gonna put this on our YouTube channel, so if you miss something, you always have the opportunity to watch it again. All right, so I'm Jen Deerinwater. I'm the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm bisexual, two-spirit, and multiply disabled. I'm a freelance journalist, a contributor at Truth Out, I'm a New Economies Reporting Project Fellow, and I was raised in rural Oklahoma and Texas, but I now live in occupied Piscataway lands known as Washington, D.C. So Crushing Colonialism's mission is to uplift and tell the stories of Indigenous people through multimedia work while supporting those doing the work. Our collective is founded and operated by Indigenous people working in a variety of media fields across the world. We work to increase the pay and employment of Indigenous media makers while also promoting their work, providing funding for providing funding for media projects, and increasing access to professional representation. In doing this work, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. So you can reach out to us and learn more about us at crushingcolonialism@gmail.com. So I'm just going to go over a few sort of housekeeping notes for the event. So we'll answer any questions towards the end of the webinar, and you can send us questions in the Zoom chat or the Facebook live stream if we can get that connected. As I mentioned earlier, any web links or social media, emails and such that are mentioned, we'll share as well in the Zoom chat. In order to make this event as accessible as possible, each panelist will describe what they look like and are wearing after I read their bios. All speakers will also say their names before speaking. And remember to not speak too fast so that all of our interpreters can keep up with you. And I'm going to describe what I look like and what I'm wearing. So I'm a lighter Native woman. I have my hair pulled back in a bun. It's brown hair, green eyes. I wear glasses. I have red lipstick on and a red t-shirt, and I have on dangling multicolored Native beaded earrings. So I'm very excited that Crushing Colonialism is able to sponsor this event. You know, I've worked for years in pro-choice and reproductive justice movements, so this is very dear to my heart. So I just want to define what reproductive justice is, because I know that's a term that a lot of people are not familiar with. So Sister Song, a women of color-led reproductive justice collective, defines reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and to parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And this is incredibly relevant and important to Indigenous people in a variety of ways, as we'll cover throughout this event. And so I want to thank all of the amazing people and organizations that have helped us to make this event happen. You know, due to the coronavirus, we had to reschedule our day-long version of this for September 12th, 2020. But we wanted to still offer a shorter virtual version of this. So I want to thank our sponsors, Campaign for Southern Equality, the LGBTQ Task Force, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, the Civil Liberties and Public Policy Program from Amherst College, the Diverse City Fund, the Washington Office on Latin America, and our fiscal sponsor, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. I also want to say wado, which is thank you in my language, to all of our volunteers, our board of director members, all of our interpreters, and our audience members today. You know, it takes a lot of people and resources to make these sorts of events happen, and I'm very honored and humbled to be able to do this work. So I do have some sad news. Lorraine Clement, her other name is also Cedar Woman. She's unable to join us today as she is in the grieving process. We lost one of our Métis elders. It's Grandma Velma Orvis. She was actually one of our scheduled speakers for the day-long institute, but she has walked on to the spirit world, and so Lorraine cannot be with us. And I just wanted to take a moment of silence to honor Grandma Velma and all of the amazing work and contribution she gave to Indigenous people. Okay. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. So Morgan Brings Plenty is a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux and is a longtime pipeline fighter and water protector. She has taken stands against the Keystone XL pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline, and to protect her tribe's buffalo. Brings Plenty was one of the first youth to stand against big oil trying to cross her lands and has grown up in the environmental justice movement. At age 25, she's now using her skills to work on the media side of the movement. She's one of the first anywhere to use video and live feeds to take firsthand witness to social media and is growing her video and photography skills. Morgan, would you please describe what you're wearing and what you look like?
Hi, this is Morgan Brings Plenty. I'm wearing a black blazer, a white t-shirt, and my hair is long and red. I'm a light-skinned native with brown eyes.
And there's some stuffed animals, a variety of stuffed animals behind Morgan. And I forgot to mention there's just a plain white wall behind me. All right, so our next panelist is Mercia Cummings. Mercia is a charismatic and passionate mental health professional with 20 years of experience assisting clients with holistic strategies to develop and maintain optimum mental health while using the emotional freedom technique. She is the co-owner of Illumin LLC, a mental health private practice in Southern Maryland, providing counseling services to children, adolescents, adults, couples, and families. Mercia's clinical approach is influenced by her Indigenous practices. She is Piscataway Conoy, as well as her Buddhist faith. So Mercia, would you please just describe what you look like and what's around you?
Hi everyone, I am Mercia Cummings. I have a black jacket on because I did yoga earlier, and I am light brown, being Afro-Indigenous, as well as blonde curly hair. My sides and back are cut close, and I represent, as Jen said, the Piscataway Conoy Nation, and my eyes are green. And I have dogs floating behind me.
Yeah, there's one cute little dog behind Mercia.
And the other one's at my feet. And my wall behind me is a bluish purple.
So our next panelist is Lucia. So Lucia is Maya Quiche Indigenous, diverse feminist, human rights activist, artist, cultural manager, and community journalist. She was born in Totonicapán, Guatemala in 1990. I apologize if I did not say that correctly. She became an activist in person and a journalist for the massacre of October 4th, 2012 at the Alaska Summit. This is a massacre that the Guatemalan Army committed against the Indigenous people, as well as part of the student movement since 2012, where she lived closely and accompanied a process of criminalization and political prison. Lucia was the representative of the University Superior Council from 2014 to 2016 of the University of San Carlos de Guatemala, and supported the democratization process of the University Student Association. Oliveira Costaneda de Leon, once again, apologies if I didn't pronounce that right. So Lucia did this from 2012 to 2017, as well as was a part of the USEC A Pueblo, a co-founder of Solidarity Festivals, and part of the Mayacat Indigenous newscast of the Guatemalan Federation of Radio Schools. Let's see, and Lucia does not have their video on. So we don't need to do a description. All right, so our first panel question, what does reproductive justice and health mean to you personally and to your community? So, Morgan, Lucia, Mercia, any of you want to answer that question?
I will. Sorry, couldn't unmute. I was fighting my computer. So when I think of reproductive justice, I actually thought very selfishly. Being able to say and do what I want to my body, have the right to dictate how it will be treated, what I can and cannot do will all be deemed by me, whether I have one daughter who's 20, but of course everyone, even till now at 43, are still like, oh, you should have another child. Instead of just let me appreciate the one child that I have, or that if I chose to not have a child and got pregnant, I have the right to determine if I want an abortion or not. But no one has the right to tell me what to do with my body. So that's what I think of when I think of reproductive justice. And also being able to have access to true sex education, not just here's your uterus, here's your vagina, here's the penis, and this is all it is, but that it also teaches me how to appreciate and enjoy my body, and then along with others. And having family planning, or if I wanted to be a single mother or raise her with my husband or not, that could be determined without judgment, without fear of repercussions from the laws, the community, or anything like that. Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's great. Morgan, Lucia, do you want to answer that question?
Hi, this is Morgan Bringsmoney. For me personally, it judges like a person based on if they're sexually active or not. And where I'm at, if a lot of people have, or one person have a lot of partners, they'll treat you horribly. And if you have no sexual partners, they treat you like you're kind of crazy. And also for me, when I see like myself, like my body and my choice, I tell people I choose not to have any sexual relations till I'm married. And even though I'm currently in a relationship with my partner, he understands that pretty well. And it's not always having sex, mostly it's building an emotional connection. That's what I think of it personally for myself.
Can I respond to that? Well, I was going to say, well, first of all, Morgan, I think that's very beautiful and powerful. And you're right that no judgment should be based on either whether you decide to have several partners or none. And the fact that you're taking control of your body is powerful, and that your partner is respecting and honoring that space you're in. And what I heard as a therapist is you're focused on intimacy. And so when we think of intimacy, it's not just about having sex. Intimacy is developing the communication, the emotional support, even in a way, the physical support through affection and nonverbal communication. So when you said that, that's what I thought of. Like, you guys are really developing strong intimacy that so many relationships do miss now. That's all.
Okay, so I was saying, Lucia, can you hear me? Would you like to answer that question? Hello? All right, I'll go ahead and answer that question then. So as someone who's been working in pro-choice and reproductive justice movements for a very long time, for me, it's about my right to make the decision to not have children and to be supported in that. you know, I decided when I was very young that I didn't want to have children. And that is my right to make, just like it's the right of other people to decide if they have children and to have the supports that they need to have children and raise them in a healthy way. You know, as an Indigenous person, a lot of our women, our womb carriers, were sterilized against their will at the Indian Health Services, which is a federally run trust and treaty right that citizens and members of recognized tribes have within the US. And the IHS in the 70s, it was estimated sterilized anywhere between 25 to 50% of the women who went there. You know, and as a disabled person, it's actually still legal in this country to sterilize us against our will. You know, while I don't want to have children, I still have the right to decide if I do or don't have children. You know, I think about, like, what would it be like if I tried, you know, if I did want children, how would I afford them? I mean, how would I afford their health care, food, housing, education? You know, I can barely get by myself. And so those are other aspects of reproductive justice that I think are really important, is making sure that we have all the supports and services that we need to have those children. There's also just such a long history of Indigenous children, as well as Black and Brown children, being stolen from our communities. We see this in the US, we see it in Canada. It happens in other Indigenous lands. And yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but for me, RJ, reproductive justice, just means so many different things that, that I feel like I could write several books about it. Lucia, where are you with us? Lucia? Okay, Lucia, can you hear me? I apologize, y'all. I'm not sure what's going on. We're having some tech issues today. All right, well, let's move on to the next question while we try to figure out where Lucia is and get her reconnected, and we can have her answer that question later if she would like. So what impact has reproductive justice, or a lack thereof, had on your communities? Mercia, Morgan, Lucia, would one of you like to answer that?
I'll answer. This is Mercia. So interesting enough, kind of piggybacking off the last question, as well as this one, is when you were sharing, Jen, your story, I make everyone laugh because I tell them I never wanted to have children or to get married. And I knew that at a very young age, and people often have always felt the right to tell me, well, what's wrong with you? You should want to have kids, you should want to get married. Now, of course, I have done both, my karma. But, you know, again, it was a choice. And it took me 10 years to even agree to get married. So even that to me is part of reproductive justice. And so the impact is, there is this pressure for people to get married. Even in the military, one of the things with folks who are older in the military, that was like very much pushed for them, especially for women, to get married. And that's why so many will get married in boot camp, having known people only for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. I think also there's a stigma for women who've chosen to stay single or not have children, like somehow they're spinsters or they're lacking somehow. And we're just talking about in community based. If we go bigger than that, we now look at the limitations of even having access to family planning through Planned Parenthood and different organizations. Now, I know Planned Parenthood has its own ugly history, but other organizations similar to that the pressure is to really shut them down or cause them to shut down, which then limits women not just to abortions, but we're looking at birth control and even just health, just to get a breast exam, just to get your, well, I know it's not annual pap smear anymore, but getting your women wellness check, just even to an annual physical. And because of that, we're seeing so many women who are being impacted with breast cancer or STIs or even mental health as a mental health clinician. So that's the impact I see in my community coming from both sides of the fence. And then even educating our communities to even be able to access these resources when they are available. Literally, if it wasn't for the jobs that I've had over the years, I wouldn't have known half of the resources that are even out there because I was required to know those resources to refer people to them.
Lucia, are you there?
Yes, I hope be there.
Okay,
So,
there you are.
yes, finally. I just want to say a lot of things. The first of all, so thank you to Crushing Colonialism to be part of that conversation. I think it's very important to talk about the reality of our bodies. So I'm going to try to say, to me, the justice have to be to my right to decide about my body, about to decide if I want to have children or not. And it's not a good reality in Guatemala, because in Guatemala now a lot of girls, of children, are having babies now. So I think it's very, very, I feel hurt about this, because in my country, in my people, are a lot of injustice. So basically try to say a lot of things, but now I'm going to talk in Spanish. La justicia, decidir sobre nuestros cuerpos, en realidad sigue siendo una tarea pendiente para los cuerpos de las mujeres indígenas en Guatemala. Yo soy una mujer que he tenido el privilegio como mujer indígena de poder decidir sobre mi cuerpo y poder decidir si quiero tener hijos o no, pero no es la realidad que viven la mayoría de niñas en mi país. En el pueblo indígena de donde yo soy, que es Totonicapán, que es un pueblo quiché, todavía hay niñas que están siendo obligadas a ser madres y no hay ninguna condición real, ni desde el Estado-Nación, obviamente, que no representa el interés de los pueblos para poder hablar sobre la realidad de las mujeres. Se sigue hablando y se sigue metiendo a la iglesia, que ha sido parte de la colonización de nuestros pueblos, para opinar sobre nosotras, para decidir sobre nosotras. Y en los últimos años en Guatemala, después de la guerra, porque vivimos una guerra y hubo genocidio, se vivió una ola fuerte de protestantismo, de iglesias neopentecostales, que se han logrado meter en los pueblos indígenas y han permeado de manera la reproducción del pensamiento machista sobre las mujeres y nuestro derecho a decidir sobre nuestros cuerpos. Guatemala ha vivido muchas de las realidades que han vivido los pueblos indígenas en todo el mundo, a raíz de que en los años de la guerra y desde antes el gobierno de Estados Unidos también hizo pruebas y experimentó enfermedades en nuestro territorio. Entonces hay mucho de qué hablar de este tema, porque sigue siendo una tarea pendiente para los pueblos indígenas que vivimos y viven, sobre todo en las áreas rurales, en extrema pobreza en el país. Entonces, esta es como una cuestión como un poco más general para entender también la realidad del país y de quienes, para quienes no sepan sobre Guatemala. Creo que que eso sería un poco para compartir iniciando. Bueno, en realidad, la realidad para las mujeres en toda Latinoamérica es bastante compleja. Creo que hay una lucha por poder decidir sobre si queremos ser madres o no, para que se legisle a favor de la legalización del aborto y otro tipo de cuestiones muy elementales de la salud pública en todo el continente. Es decir, Centroamérica y Suramérica ha llevado una batalla muy fuerte a raíz, digamos, de este derecho a la salud reproductiva que se nos ha negado a las mujeres. Esto sería inicialmente y cedo la palabra. Gracias.
And thank you, Lucia. Morgan, would you like to answer the question? And just as a reminder, the last question was, what impact has reproductive justice or the lack thereof had on your community?
Yes, I would like to answer that. This is Morgan. Oh, well, in my community here on the Cheyenne River Reservation, we don't have enough money to provide services. Our women's health is tribal funded program, not IHS Indian Health funded program. So our women's community members basically have to travel here to town, and that could be anywhere between 90 to 100 miles one way, and oftentimes they don't have transportation, and it costs some amount of money. For instance, someone from outside of town like Cherokee, it would cost about $25, $30 for food and gas. So those are some of the lack of services for those who need it. Yeah.
So one of the things that comes to mind sort of talking about healthcare access that you mentioned, Morgan, that lack of healthcare access, I mean, it's a problem across the United States. I mean, we are seeing right now just how poorly operated and funded and prepared our own healthcare systems quite often are. But that situation is so much more dire for our Native people. You know, IHS, Indian Health Services, and I apologize, this is Jen speaking. IHS, the funding is so low that you actually have better health care in the Bureau of Prisons. There's several $1,000s more appropriated to each inmate, each incarcerated person under the Bureau of Prisons than there is for Native people under IHS. And that number also gets more dire if you are an urban-based Native, which something I think a lot of people don't know is that 71% of Native people in the US live in urban areas. And that was due to what's referred to as the 1950s termination era, when the United States came in and, you know, said, oh, we're going to send you to cities, you'll have housing and jobs and everything will be great. And our people moved to cities and found out that wasn't quite the case. You know, so not only do we have these problems with just like the healthcare on our reservations or, you know, other tribal lands, but it's also a problem in urban areas. And while, yes, I do have access to non-Native medical care here, that doesn't mean that all of my needs are being met. You know, I am often assaulted with just a barrage of offensive and derogatory questions and comments in healthcare settings. You know, and sometimes it's because I'm Native, sometimes it's because I'm bi or because I'm disabled. but that also becomes an access barrier. There are times when I don't go to doctor's appointments because I just don't have it in me to deal with the nonsense that could be thrown my way. And so that's another area where we're lacking. You know, it's not just even the lack of healthcare access, it's the lack of culturally competent healthcare access, as well as in mental health care, which Mercia can speak to more in a moment. You know, I'm also thinking.
I was going to say, I want to respond to even having health insurance doesn't even guarantee you have deductibles. I have clients who have $5,000 deductibles, so they still have to pay out of pocket just to see me. My own insurance, when my daughter went to counseling, we had to pay out of pocket because no one accepted our health insurance. And luckily at that point I was working like 2 or 3 jobs, so I could afford it. But if I were just doing what I'm doing now, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. So even thinking that, oh, well, you have health insurance, but even that has limitations. So I had one client, her insurance didn't even cover mental health.
Yeah, that's all very accurate. There have been times in my life when I had health insurance, but I was paid so poorly, I couldn't afford the $10 deductible. You know, I couldn't afford the $30 deductible for birth control. You know, like that's a problem. And even as a disabled person who receives SSDI, which it stands for Social Security Disability Insurance, because I am disabled and have SSDI, I get Medicare and Medicaid for my health insurance. But even then, you know, Medicare has copays. They have premiums that you have to pay, and Medicare only pays 80% of your bills. So you then have to have a secondary insurance plan and a prescription insurance plan, you know, and if you are living off of Social Security, it's not, you can't pay those things and survive. It's just not possible. And just going back to the trust and treaty responsibility of healthcare, I think a lot of non-natives think, oh, this is just one of the free things that those Indians get, but it's not free. We paid through land and water and timber. We've paid through oil, gas, uranium. We've paid through the lives of our women, our children, our two-spirits, our people. We paid for this. And just like with any other treaty responsibility, the United States government just never honors it properly. You know, we don't even have much IHS care or urban Indian health care when you go east of the Mississippi. We don't have that in Washington, D.C., even though we have natives living here. And that's a problem. And even if you're in IHS, that doesn't mean that you'll get a lot of the care you need, which Morgan mentioned. A great deal of our IHS facilities don't have sexual assault nurse examiners. They don't offer abortion. And because of federal laws, they're not allowed to offer elective abortion, but they are required to offer abortion in the case of rape, incest, or to protect the life of the pregnant person. But even then, IHS doesn't offer abortion. You know, so how do our people get what they need? And also, how do they feel safe going there, knowing that there is also this history of being sterilized? So Lucia, would you like to answer our first question? We were having some issues hearing you, but that was just talking about what reproductive justice means to you. Lucia, I can't hear you.
Yeah, ahora, you can hear.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Bueno, creo que para contextualizar un poco, I just have to give some context. Guatemala es un país donde la mayoría de personas somos indígenas. Es decir, más del 60% de la población somos indígenas. Y para contrastar un poco porcentajes, más del 60% de la población vive en extrema pobreza. Es decir, que cuando estamos hablando de condiciones básicas de vida, educación, salud, trabajo, comida y estas cosas, eso es una tarea que no está resuelta para los pueblos indígenas. Es decir, que estamos hablando de que los derechos y condiciones más elementales de vida para las grandes mayorías en Guatemala no están resueltas. Entonces, cuando hablamos de la justicia y el tema, digamos, de todo lo que hemos estado conversando y lo que he estado escuchando que ustedes están hablando, pues vivimos una realidad muy parecida en una amplia mayoría. En Guatemala ha habido migración interna de personas indígenas a las áreas urbanas y estas personas viven en periferias donde no hay ninguna condición básica de salubridad ni para vivir, no hay drenajes, no hay energía, y esa es una situación muy similar a la de las personas que viven en las áreas rurales. Entonces, cuando se habla, digamos, de condiciones de salud, estamos hablando de que hay hospitales sin médicos, sin medicinas, sin ningún tipo de condición física, de condiciones elementales, perdón, de salud. Entonces, mucho menos hay condiciones para la salud reproductiva. Y eso, básicamente, a quienes más afecta es a las mujeres y a las mujeres indígenas en general. En algún momento se ha hablado de planificación familiar, pero con la connotación racista de exclusión que prohíbe, obviamente, a las mujeres y que lo que hace es buscar que las mujeres no puedan tener, aunque hay una contrariedad, porque en Guatemala hay un alto porcentaje de niñas indígenas siendo madres en áreas rurales y en las ciudades, entonces en el tema de la salud reproductiva en Guatemala. Y para mí, obviamente, en una condición como mujer indígena, con mejores accesos o con muchos más accesos que a las otras mujeres indígenas de Guatemala, pues obviamente es la posibilidad de tener, de poder decidir sobre mi cuerpo, de poder decidir sobre si deseo o no tener hijos, pero en este país, con estas nulas condiciones de vida, realmente pues la decisión es negativa, ¿no? La reproducción, la salud reproductiva es básicamente un privilegio para las minorías de este país. Y esta es una realidad pues muy parecida en Centroamérica y en toda Latinoamérica. Creo que Centroamérica tiene más altos porcentajes de pobreza. Guatemala ocupa el segundo lugar más pobre de toda Latinoamérica. El primer lugar lo ocupa Honduras y ambos países están en Centroamérica. Entonces, obviamente, las condiciones de salud y de condiciones de vida digna básicas son nulas para los pueblos indígenas y sobre todo para las mujeres. Entonces, eso es un poco, digamos, del contexto que toca vivir. Es decir, hay centros de salud en muy pocos lugares del país, no hay una cobertura resuelta y estos no tienen condiciones ni médicas, ni mucho menos de otro tipo para poder resolver la planificación y la salud reproductiva para las mujeres. Entonces, para mí, hablar de este tema es importantísimo porque visibiliza la realidad de colonialismo que se impone todavía sobre los cuerpos de las mujeres indígenas. Y esto sería, gracias. Espero que me hayan escuchado. Ha sido complicada la conexión.
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Morgan, would you like to speak a little more about, what we've talked about so far? You need to unmute yourself, Morgan.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, this is Morgan. When thinking about like the abortion part and more about the healthcare and stuff and the rape. In our community, we don't have anything like that or can't do anything about it. If someone is raped here, like they go to the ER, then there's like no rape kits because of the funding issues. Like, yeah, we can get on birth control as well, and but like not enough. And as far as abortion goes here, the women will have to travel about 6 hours out of our town, out of our community to get one, because there's only like one city that allows it, or otherwise they have to go out of state for their abortion. And a lot of the times the women here are pretty much stuck with that because there is like no funding and literally no help to help these women out. Yeah.
So just to give some numbers and context for those who are, kind of data nerds like myself, the Department of Justice performed a study in, I believe it was 2015, 2016, a few years ago. And in that study, they found that 84.3% of Native women had been abused at some point in our lives. It also said that every year, 1 in 3 Native women would be abused. Some of the issues that we've run into with this is an issue of jurisdiction. Our tribal governments, when these assaults happen on our lands, they often don't have jurisdiction. They're not able to arrest and try and convict these predators. There's almost no rights for us as Native people when these things happen, and even when they do happen in urban areas, it doesn't mean that you're going to, see any form of justice within the criminal system. So I think that's really important to understand and to get that. Native women suffer very high rates of trafficking, so do our Two-Spirits. And our children. And for those who aren't familiar with the term Two-Spirit, so Two-Spirit is a contemporary English language term that's meant to sort of encapsulate and explain some of the non-binary gender identities that we had before the white invasion and before forced Christianity. My people, for example, the Cherokee had more than 2 genders. The Lakota had more than 2 genders. The Dene had more than 2 genders. It's common amongst Indigenous nations that we did have more than just, quote, men or women. And our Two-Spirit people are suffering a great deal too. Not only do they have the violence of being Indigenous, but they also have to suffer the violence of being queer people. And while I know a lot of times we like to think that, at least within the US, we've gained so much ground around queer rights, this country is still not a safe place for queer people, which unfortunately is a problem across the world and a problem within some of our tribal communities. So let's move on and talk a bit about COVID-19. Obviously this pandemic is impacting our health and our lives, and we have a real shortage in the US of resources and such. And I know that the situation is much worse when you start looking into the Indigenous lands in Latin America. So for the speakers, how has COVID-19 impacted your community, if it has impacted it? And what supports or policy or resources does your community need to survive this pandemic?
So here in Southern Maryland, for instance, well, I'll even speak on some of my clients, some Indigenous, some most.
And this is Mercia speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Mercia. And just people of color, their jobs are requiring them to have masks, but not providing a mask. and then telling them they can't work if they don't have a mask. Or even for myself, my part-time job, because they don't have the clientele there, being temporarily laid off. So seeing the impact, not just the health, and I'm gonna tap on that too, but just the economic impact, that people are being temporarily or even permanently laid off from their employment, or asked to have resources that they themselves can't even provide, but are expecting you to have. As far as my business, I had to go completely online. And so that impact is that everyone isn't appropriate for online counseling. So even still going to my office to see clients, because I don't want them to be abandoned during this time. From there, health-wise, it's definitely started impacting my father's side of the family. I have a great aunt who was at a nursing home here where I think 17 of the patients ended up testing positive for COVID, and she's now on a ventilator. She is 90 something years old. And so even it hitting close to home, I have had family members who've had other family members who have passed away because of complications with COVID or COVID itself. And then also coming across a few Indigenous family members who don't take it seriously. They just don't believe in the quarantine and are still going out. And that's concerning too, because to me, they're impacting the folks who are trying to care for themselves and keep themselves safe. So like I said, it's across the board. And then limited access to your doctors, to even your dentist, to your therapist. So we're now looking at mind, body, and spirit. And then the isolation, we're seeing an increase in domestic violence and child abuse, because families are at home where school and work were their escape. And I had a couple other thoughts, but I have to admit, I've completely forgotten them. But I mean, for me, that's where I'm seeing this increase in couples even reaching out for counseling, and because this is the most time many of them have even spent together as families. And then also seeing that like places are requiring you to go back to work. DC will be opening up, I think, mid-May. And my daughter, for instance, her job calling her and asking her, okay, well, are you coming back to work? And I told her, we have a home. You may have to go without a job, because you can't put your life at risk, and especially since she is helping me take care of our parents and taking them groceries and making sure they have what they need.
Morgan, Lucia, would one of you like to talk about how COVID-19 is impacting your communities?
Hi, this is Morgan. In my community, our tribe has been very proactive and not reactive, because we are on the reservation and we haven't given away any of our sovereignty. We put laws in place to protect our people, including border checkpoints, travel permits, 14-day quarantine upon return from outside the reservation, and our health department checks on us, and so does the police. Like, we do not have enough test kits. We have 3 ventilators, and the Department of Interior stole half the funds for tribes to fight COVID-19 and gave them to Alaskan corporations like the Elliott Corporation. My tribe and other tribes are suing them because the corporations are not tribal governments. And we need masks for people, we need personal protection equipment for the hospital, for the police, and at the jail. So that is how it affected us. And my mom's only been outside the house maybe twice this past couple months. And my father is an essential worker, which puts our family at risk, because since he's working and coming home and helping to take care of errands while we're sitting here kind of quarantined. And if we go to a medical appointment off the reservation, we have to go to a 14-day mandatory quarantine. our regular clinic is shut down, so it's hard for those that have chronic illnesses like diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, and so much more to get the care that we need. And some of our community members do wear masks and are very precautious about what is going on, and some of our members in our community are very ignorant and doesn't think that it will affect them. But since there are rising numbers in my state of South Dakota, there's always a risk for everybody that comes onto their res or just around other communities.
You know, I did even forget to mention, I was still going to work because I'm an essential worker. And so, and I had to be tested every time I went on to the campus, but still I was putting myself at risk. My husband had been activated by the military for a response on a hospital, and they were able to work from home, but then they started rotating to go into the office. And so even though we're saying quarantine, they're not saying everyone has to quarantine. So we've got to keep that in mind as well, that we could potentially be asymptomatic even. And so not even just everyone's looking for symptoms. That's not always the case as well. So like I said, that's why I've even limited my interactions with other people or kept them at a distance, because I'm assuming that I could be asymptomatic because I have still had to go out into the community. So think about it, I have to isolate and even require my family to isolate because of the work we do.
Lucia, would you like to tell us about what's happening with COVID-19 in Guatemala?
Sí, solo espero que me escuchen. Bueno, solo básicamente información para tener claridad. Como les había contado, Guatemala es el segundo país más pobre de toda Latinoamérica, y eso quiere decir que el 61.1% de su población vive en extrema pobreza. Con el tema del COVID-19, en Guatemala, del 100% de la población, que somos aproximadamente 19 millones, solamente tiene acceso al agua 21.2% de la población. Cuando la OMS ha hablado de que una de las principales medidas es poderse lavar las manos, solamente el 21.2% de la población va a poder lavarse las manos, es decir, el 80% del resto del país no tiene acceso al agua en áreas urbanas y rurales. Y esa es una realidad que aplica muy cercana para toda Latinoamérica. Y yo lo contrasto porque somos los pueblos indígenas los que nos hemos encargado de hacer conservación en los bosques a nivel mundial, y es gracias a nosotros los pueblos que hay agua en la tierra y que se logra conservar. Y entonces no estamos teniendo acceso a ella a partir de racismo y muchas otras cosas más. Para mí, en lo particular, esta crisis sanitaria es una forma autoritaria de dominación de nuestros cuerpos efectiva a nombre de la seguridad. Es una forma de reprimir y amedrentar a la población a partir de violencia psicológica, mediática y en redes sociales, medios escritos y televisivos. Decretan obediencia, decretan silencio y decretan miedo. En el contexto de esto que ha estado pasando, inclusive tenemos desabastecimiento de médicos, de medicinas y de espacios para atender a los enfermos. Algo bien importante es que desde el 21 de marzo se decretó en Guatemala un toque de queda que tiene restringidas las garantías de circulación y prácticamente tiene restringidas nuestros derechos elementales a toda la población para circular de 4 de la mañana a 6 de la tarde ahora. El toque de queda es una prohibición, obviamente, para que no podamos circular y supuestamente para que no nos podamos contagiar, pero a partir de que se dictaminó este toque de queda, han habido 5,000 personas detenidas por violar este toque de queda. Y eso quiere, y de estas, hasta el último registro, 300 no habían podido pagar las multas y se habían quedado en las cárceles. Eso quiere decir que ha aumentado el confinamiento en las cárceles. Entonces es bien complejo porque en el contexto también de lo que se ha estado viviendo, la criminalización y persecución a los pueblos indígenas continúa. Han habido detenciones para personas que defienden sus derechos y defienden el territorio en el marco de esta pandemia. Entonces es bastante compleja la situación que se está viviendo, que toca vivir. A raíz de las áreas boscosas también ha habido un incremento de incendios y cosas en los bosques y no se le ha podido dar la respuesta por todo lo que está pasando. Entonces, Guatemala tiene hasta el momento 400 casos más o menos. Tengo ahí información que puedo ir corroborando en lo que sigamos platicando para poder ir viendo, digamos, han habido pocos casos detectados porque no hay una alta demanda de médicos haciendo pruebas. En Guatemala no están haciendo las pruebas necesarias del COVID-19 y entonces creemos que esto se va a ir disparando en mayo. En mayo creemos que la situación va a incrementar y que va a ser crítica. No sé si han tenido información, pero Ecuador ha estado en una crisis bastante compleja a raíz de todo lo que ha estado pasando con el COVID-19, personas muriendo en la calle sin ningún tipo de seguimiento. Entonces es una realidad bien compleja la que se vive en Latinoamérica porque los porcentajes de desigualdad y exclusión social son muy grandes. Entonces estamos diciendo que las grandes mayorías de todo este continente no tienen resuelta la salud pública como tal, entonces obviamente la salud para una crisis como esta no está resuelta. Sería un poco, digamos, lo que podría compartir en este momento. Gracias.
Yeah, so I'll speak a bit about what's happening with my own nation, the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. So our ancestral lands actually fall across a large part of what's now the southeast U.S., but under the Indian Removal Act, we were forced from our lands into what was then known as Indian Territory and is now present-day Oklahoma. That removal is called the Trail Where They Cried or the Trail of Tears. So Cherokee Nation is the largest federally recognized tribal nation within the U.S. We have over 370,000 enrolled citizens, and that's across the world. And then within our 14-county tribal jurisdiction in Oklahoma, we have about 141,000 of our citizens. You know, I just read recently that the Cherokee Nation tribal-run healthcare, which is the largest in the U.S., they've gotten 1,500 tests, which is quite a bit more than a lot of other tribal nations, but 1,500 is nothing when you're looking at a population of 141,000. You know, the first person to die in Oklahoma of COVID-19 was a Cherokee Nation citizen. You know, I worry for my people. I worry because the elected leaders, the non-native elected leaders running the state and the cities and stuff are just, they are horrific. The Oklahoma governor never put a stay-at-home order in place, and Oklahoma has now started the process of, you know, reopening the economy. You know, I worry what's going to happen for our people there, and you know, I think about what it means for me as Cherokee Nation citizen versus some of our other tribal nations. You know, by no means do we have what we need and deserve, but I know that we are doing significantly better across the board with resources than some other tribes. And that worries me. If things are bad for us, what is it like for the relatives in other tribes that don't have the same level of resources? Even Navajo Nation, which is the second largest federally recognized tribe in this country, they are just in full crisis mode. I just read a couple days ago that they have now had more confirmed COVID-19 deaths than 13 states combined. And the federal government is doing almost nothing for our Native people. The Zuni Pueblo put out a press release towards the beginning of April saying that they are facing extinction. So COVID-19, while it may seem like, oh, that's not a reproductive justice issue, it is, because if you can't get health care, you can't survive a pandemic. Like, the likelihood is significantly lower for us. You know, and as Lucia said, so many in Guatemala don't have water. Well, a lot of the people in Navajo Nation do not have running water. A lot of the people in our tribal lands don't have clean running water. So how do you wash your hands? How do you sanitize your home if you don't have water? You know, such a basic human right that so many of our Indigenous people are going without. You know, and then I can just say for myself, how COVID-19 has made an impact on me. You know, I live in Washington, D.C., so I do have access to a great deal more resources than I would if I were on my tribal lands or living in a more rural area. However, as a person that's chronically ill and multiply disabled, I'm going without all of my regular health care right now. So that's making my own health issues worse. A lot of the disabled people in DC are going without their home health care workers because the home health care workers are not being supported. They're not being given, you know, the personal protective equipment. They're not having any of their new costs, such as transportation to and from clients' homes, because public transportation has essentially been almost canceled here. You know, and I'm not seeing the DC Mayor Muriel Bowser or any of the City Council doing anything to protect our disabled and chronically ill people who aren't seniors. And sadly, I can say I haven't seen Cherokee Nation do anything for people who aren't seniors either. Just trying to grocery shop, even though I have all these grocery stores around me, none of them provide special hours for disabled or chronically ill people who aren't seniors. You know, I was just turned away trying to grocery shop at a Trader Joe's because they refused to turn the elevator on for me, so I couldn't access the store. You know, so even when you're in a city, that still doesn't mean you're getting what you need. Like, yes, it is a significantly better situation than a lot of our rural folks, but it's still not what it should be. And this is all a form of reproductive injustice. You know, Native people in the US only finally rebounded from over 500 years of genocide to represent 2% of the total US population. And now with this pandemic, as we have seen over the years with smallpox and Spanish flu, we are the people who are going to suffer greatly, along with Black and Brown people as well, who are also, you know, have a lot of deaths right now. So let's move on to.
Well, actually, I just want to respond to that. And if you look at television, this Mercia again, sorry, and you look at all these stars, and they're like, I'm great. And they have access to, you know, the doctor is going to make a house call for them. And no doctor is going to make that house call for me. And so if we just look even socioeconomic, of course, who's going to be impacted most? People of color, of course. And so no doctor showing up. A whole basketball team was tested, but we can't get tested at my doctor's office. So, I mean, if we just look at that impact on us, and then if we go, well, I'll wait till your next question to answer that. But we go even closer to home, I can even respond to how my tribe is even responding to things. But I'll wait till your next question. I just wanted to respond to that, just the socioeconomic impact, because if you have the money, you have the resources. You wake up with the resources.
Yeah, since I'm press, I am an essential worker. Because I'm immunocompromised, I'm not out on the streets and chasing stories the way I normally do, but I am still doing my work. And I just watching, was it Noah Trevor from The Daily Show? He's been doing something online called The Daily Social Distancing Show. Yeah. do not fully agree with a lot of his politics. I don't think he's far enough to the left. But every time I hear him say, we're in this together, I just feel enraged because we are not in this together. You know,
No.
how it's impacting us is all significantly different than how it's impacting a straight, able-bodied, well-to-do, well-resourced cis man living in the New York City area.
Right. And they're telling us not to go to the hospital. Again, they have the doctor to show up for them. We can't even go to the hospital. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And they want us to wait until we have extreme symptoms. So if I have mild symptoms, I can just stay home and isolate. Don't pet your dogs and isolate from your family. That's what it says. I looked at the CDC. So first of all, I've already exposed my husband if I've had it, because we sleep in the same bed, and they say you only show symptoms 2 to 2 weeks. Of course, my dogs are going to stay up under me. So now my family's at risk. And if they're at risk and I was asymptomatic or I didn't show symptoms for 2 weeks, they've gone out to the community. My daughter dropped some stuff off to my father. So now he's a 70-year-old man. I've gone to drop stuff off to my aunt, who's a part of the tribe. Do you see, like, and there's nothing we can do about it. Because again, I got to sit with it until I'm on death's bed before I can even allowed to go to the hospital.
So this is Jen. Thank you, Mercia. Just moving along. So I have a question here that's specifically for Lucia. Please talk to us about the state of Indigenous people in Guatemala and in Central and South America. How has colonialism impacted your people, and how is it similar or different to what you've seen in the US or Canada?
¿Me escuchan nuevamente? Creo que sí. ¿Sí me escuchan? Perfecto, gracias. Bueno, creo que es importante hablar de esto porque es estructural. Este es un tema profundamente estructural. Guatemala ha vivido, y Latinoamérica en general, es colonizada obviamente desde hace más de 500 años, y ha vivido también distintos procesos de despojo. Y yo creo que eso es algo que tenemos que tener como muy en cuenta, de cómo el despojo, el colonialismo y ahora el capitalismo hacen una triada, le digo yo, perfecta para la dominación, porque es básicamente eso. Nosotros en Guatemala y en Latinoamérica a nivel general, creemos que el colonialismo se sigue viviendo de esta manera. Yo siempre he mencionado, particularmente en el caso de Guatemala, Guatemala sigue viviendo con relaciones económicas de colonia. Yo digo, Guatemala no es un país, es una finca todavía, una finca de algodón, una finca de café, donde todavía hay pagos de jornal para indígenas que trabajan en estas fincas de 50 centavos, de un quetzal, que es realmente un trabajo esclavizante. Esa es una realidad que se vive actualmente. Entonces el colonialismo, capitalismo, como podamos llamarle, porque van de la mano, porque son cercanos, porque el capitalismo es lo que ha ido evolucionando de lo que viene del colonialismo, que es el despojo racista, que es todo lo que entiendo que como mujeres indígenas lo tenemos bien claro porque lo hemos vivido. Está metido en nuestros cuerpos, está metido en nuestras mentes y está metida en todas las relaciones humanas en nuestros territorios. Y una forma importante ha sido la resistencia que hemos tenido como pueblos indígenas a esa colonización, a cómo hemos tenido que usar el sincretismo para poder seguir celebrando a nuestras energías, a nuestros nahuales, que son como las energías desde la cosmovisión de nuestros pueblos. Entonces, en realidad, los impactos son fuertes, son duros, porque se sigue a raíz del extractivismo actual, despojando territorios, desalojando comunidades indígenas y masacrando comunidades. Yo justamente en el 2012 me decidí a ser activista porque hubo una masacre del pueblo de donde yo vengo. Entonces, esas prácticas de violencia, esas prácticas de despojo que la colonia dejó están bien instauradas en el imaginario colectivo de los estados-nación y han sido apropiadas por los estados-nación para seguir siendo implementadas como políticas actuales, como políticas que nos segregan, como políticas que nos discriminan, como políticas que nos despojan. Entonces ahora, a partir de los estados-nación, que no es una lógica que representa la lógica y la mirada que tenemos los pueblos indígenas, que no nos representa como naciones, como países, como estados-nación, perdón. Entonces, obviamente es ahora a raíz de las leyes de estos estados que nosotros estamos siendo despojados en esa continuidad del colonialismo. Entonces, los impactos son grandes porque han generado a partir de distintas formas han buscado la homogenización y la desaparición de nuestros pueblos. Es decir, hubo a inicios de los 1900, hubieron en las dictaduras militares decretos de ladinización por decreto. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que se fueron a comunidades indígenas completas a decirles que iban a ser ladinizados y dejaban de ser indígenas inmediatamente. Y entonces ha habido un despojo de identidad. En mi caso, por ejemplo, yo soy una indígena transculturalizada. Es decir, no uso mi ropa, no hablo mi imposiciones fuertes para que dejemos de sentir y de tener nuestra conexión con nuestra raíz indígena, con nuestra raíz originaria. Entonces es bastante compleja la situación para mí. Creo que es una realidad que se vive en toda Latinoamérica, en esa lucha constante y vibrante que estamos en medio de la globalización, en medio del internet, en medio del capitalismo colonial y el despojo, seguir luchando por visibilizarnos como pueblos indígenas vivos, con nuestras contradicciones, con nuestras incoherencias, porque obviamente el purismo para mí es otro fascismo y entonces obviamente ya de eso hay muy poco de indígenas puros, pero creo que sí es esa lucha constante y permanente por mantenernos, vivir y resistir en medio de la realidad actual del extractivismo y del despojo colonial que se sigue viviendo actualmente en nuestros pueblos y en nuestros contextos. Porque el racismo que impera en estas políticas de segregación son muy fuertes y esas aplican a nivel mundial. Yo estoy segura que todas las compañeras del panel sabemos lo que ha representado la colonia en nuestros cuerpos, en nuestras mentes y en nuestras historias y la lucha constante que tenemos por negarnos a eso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Lucia. It's amazing how we can be so different in such different parts of the world, different languages, cultures, ways of being, and yet there are so many similarities in the way that colonialism has been used to harm us, to commit either a literal genocide or a cultural genocide. And the more that I learn about Indigenous people of other lands, there really is sort of a similar pattern to the way colonialism works. So this next question is for Mercia, and I apologize, this is Jen. So Mercia, what are some tools or advice you have to give to Indigenous people who are struggling with mental health care issues, especially right now under COVID-19?
As you see, my dog decided to join us. Hi, this is Mercia. He wasn't feeling any love sitting next to me. So, well, a few things. First of all is I would actually say journaling, especially if you don't have access to a counselor. It's important to get out of our heads. Sometimes, well, not even sometimes, all times when we are in our heads, I'm sorry, I speak fast. I'm trying to learn to slow down. But when we are in our heads, we create more chaos than we already need to create in a chaotic world. This is a good time to connect to people. I know we are being asked to isolate, but we don't have to isolate if we can help it. This is contacting family, friends, even if it's meeting your friends 6 feet apart, of course, and engaging each other on that, just to kind of have a friendly face. If you do have access to the internet and a computer or your cell phone, doing FaceTime, texting, engaging each other, it seems simple, but a lot of times we've forgotten how to engage people because we've become dependent on just social media. And that will truly help a lot with the mental health. And then, like I said earlier, journaling, getting out of your head, acknowledging your feelings, giving them a label, but then from there, being able to decide how to be productive with them. If you find yourself angry at this time because of what our countries are doing, decide what to do with that anger. You just can't sit with it. So that's one way. I'm also trying to make myself more available to people via text, because that's easier to control and just holding space. It's not even counseling, it's just being able to hold space, because sometimes it is about being heard. There are a variety of mental health programs now. The states are asking us to volunteer. I'd rather not do it through the state because I just feel like it'll be limited to who will actually have access and even know that exists. So I'm doing that on my own. Making sure you're getting outside and getting air. Don't just sit in the house. And if it's sitting out front for 10 minutes, get some sun, get some air. If it's raining, just step out front. Got to get some fresh air into your body. And then also determine, how will you take this new normal into when things, I guess, when we're out of this quarantine, how will you be different? How will you be better from this? Start figuring that out now. For me, it's learning to slow down and to connect to my community more than I have been. It was so easy for me to focus on work. So even I've had to take a look at myself and yes, I want to make money and be able to take care of my family, but I also want to be healthy and happy. And so that means making some cuts and taking some dings financially, but if I'll be healthier, hopefully doing that. So I guess that's just some basic stuff. Eating as healthy as possible. I know we have limited access to food and toilet paper, but also leaning on your community for resources. Like I found that I actually had this toilet paper that didn't have the round thing in it. And so I was like, why? Because I have enough toilet paper, I could give up some rolls. And so if anyone needs those, I'm willing to mail those out. But if I see I have an abundance of something, offering, because I was going out in the community still when they first initiated the quarantine, I put a thing on Facebook and say, hey, because I'm going out, if you find you need something, let me know, because I'd rather I can go since I'm already out than someone else who could potentially harm themselves. And even Jen, you've implemented reaching out and checking on people and seeing what they needed in close proximity, but reaching out to a lot of us. So if someone else is closer, that can get to them. So that's been, I think, a very good use of community during this time. So that's it. And if you have a pet, spend a lot of time with them, because obviously mine is demanding attention right now. If you all can visualize, I have a 20-pound Yorkie who is 9 years old, but thinks he's still my baby. So, and that's all I have.
All right, well, thank you, Mercia. This is Jen again. A lot of those things I've been finding helpful for myself. You know, it's very easy for me as a journalist, especially during a time like this, to just get so bogged down in the work, and then to just, as a result, feel just a almost complete lack of hope and faith in humanity. It can be hard to maintain that feeling of hope when you know so much about how awful the world is. But moments like these and being with the relatives like Mercia, Morgan, and Lucia, really kind of helps keep me going. So thank you for that, Mercia. Morgan, so this question is specifically for you. What are some of your concerns for our Indigenous youth? And how are youth fighting against colonialism and fighting for reproductive justice?
Hi, this is Morgan. Well, the youth here are basically facing homelessness, houselessness, and a lot of it is directed to families, and many are often living in generation homes, and sometimes there is no control in the home itself. There could be alcohol or substance abuse or possibly a sexual predator or domestic violence that's going on. And there is little to no safety nets for the youth that are under the age of 18 to go and be safe somewhere. And there is an organization here in my town that does say they help the youth, but they regularly pass on the numbers and chase the youth away. And when people say they are here for the youth, but uses us for their own means. And when you do reach 18, a lot of the people don't really care about you at all. And as far as reproductive justice, the youth in South Dakota, of course, doesn't have access to abortion services easily. Like I said, there is one place in South Dakota, and that is in Sioux Falls, and that's where you can get a legal abortion. You have to do that before you're 22 weeks pregnant. And South Dakota has some of the strictest abortion laws out there. And if you're under 18, you have to have a parent's consent. And it does cost a ton of money to go down to Sioux Falls, and having to wait at least 72 hours. So it costs the hotel, room, food, and the extra cost if you're bringing someone else with you. And like I said earlier, is the IHS does provide birth control on my reservation, and we don't really have a say whether to have a baby here in town or not. They will send us out of town, probably to Rapid City or Pierre or possibly Bismarck in North Dakota. We don't have a say for a midwife or anything along those lines. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, yes, this is Jen. So I think that we often forget sometimes that our youth in general, Indigenous or otherwise, are incredibly powerful, and they're some of our fiercest warriors. And, you know, the Native community within the US, 42% of it is made up by people 24 or younger. So supporting our youth as Indigenous people is so crucial. One, because we should just support our relatives. And two, you know, they're the ones that are inheriting the mess that was created under colonialism. You know, our 7 generations to come are the ones that are going to have to continue to work to clean up this mess. And I think we need to remember, those of us who are older and are not youth, including those of us who are maybe not elders yet, like myself, we need to remember to stand with the youth and be there for them. So last question before we open it up for audience Q&A. And if you have any questions for any of the panelists or about anything Crushing Colonialism is doing, just please put that into the Zoom chat and we'll address those in a couple minutes. But for this last question, I'd like to know, just briefly talk about some of the projects that you're currently working on to help address some of the issues that we've spoken about during this event. And Lucia, would you like to go first with that? I know you are doing so much incredible work.
Bueno, muchas gracias. En realidad creo que este panel apoya a visibilizar la realidad que estamos viviendo los pueblos indígenas en Guatemala, en Latinoamérica y en distintos lugares. También me quiero contarles que yo soy parte de la agrupación latinoamericana Somos una Via Yala, que es una organización pues, que hace comunicación popular para visibilizar estas realidades de colonialismo y de despojo que estamos viviendo actualmente. Entonces, creo que una forma importante de apoyar es visibilizar, es compartir esta información, es buscar más información. Hay muchos textos en inglés, hay mucha información en distintos lugares que cuenta la historia de Latinoamérica, que cuenta la historia de los pueblos indígenas, porque en realidad yo creería que la historia de los pueblos indígenas, los pueblos indígenas, los pueblos negros y los pueblos en general, los pueblos originarios, es una sola. Es una sola y si lo siento si estoy hablando muy rápido, voy a igual tratar de ser más lenta. Entonces eso, les decía, visibilizar la realidad, compartir información, las existentes es una forma de poder apoyar el trabajo que nosotros estamos haciendo. Nos pueden seguir en las redes sociales, compartir nuestro trabajo. Están las redes sociales de festivales solidarios que están en Facebook, en Twitter, Instagram, las redes sociales de Somos una Via Yala, que también están en Facebook, Twitter e Instagram, donde estamos contando al mundo estas historias, donde estamos hablando de la realidad de la salud reproductiva de las mujeres, donde estamos hablando de las condiciones que hay en las que vive Latinoamérica. Creo que esa es una forma importante de apoyar y de sumarse a la causa por la verdad. Nosotras particularmente, yo estoy creyendo que también estamos disputando discurso, estamos rompiendo cerco mediático. Obviamente como mujeres y como personas originarias no tenemos acceso a los medios, al mass media que le dicen. Entonces estamos usando las redes sociales para romper el colonialismo definitivamente. Entonces, muchas gracias.
And this is Jen. I just shared in our Zoom chat some of the social media and web links for Lucia and the work that she's doing so that you can follow her and keep track. So Mercia or Morgan, would one of you like to answer this question about the projects you're working on currently?
Yeah, this is Morgan. Some of the projects like we're currently working on is the fight against Keystone XL. And since that, because of the man camps that are being brought into the communities or close to the communities, and within these fights, we do have a lot of water protectors that are from the LGBTQ community in the 2S that we're all working together to fight against this big pipeline, because they will try to bring in a lot of injustice towards every gender that is known and not known. And so like we're just like standing up, trying to fight for our rights, for clean water, for our people, and to make sure that our community members and our people in general, those that are living around us, are staying safe and protected.
Hi, this is Mercia. So One of the things I've actually been looking for is a doctor and or OBGYN that specializes in trauma. One of the things I found was because I'm trauma-focused clinician, many of my women who have a history of trauma have a difficult time when it's time for their exams. And surprisingly, it's been a challenge for me. I'm also, for myself, looking at getting licensed in several states. Currently, I am licensed in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, but I'm looking to move up north, or not actually move, but getting licensure because I realized how many people don't have access to mental health. And then from there, I want to start looking into grants that would at least fund that so I could start seeing more people for free and allowing the grant to kind of cover those fees for them. So again, people can have access to mental health and to me, not toot my own horn, but good and helpful mental health support, not just, because I'm available, they come to me, but also understand I'm very passionate about it. And it's funny, I wrote something down. I can't remember what it was. No, I think that was it. And just trying to engage my own community more. This doesn't have much to do with reproductive health, but I think it's important as far as my own tribe. I've been pushing for developing our language. And even though to me, language is culture, which is language. And so if we can do that, I think it allows us to connect to our own culture more because we only have one language speaker left. And by doing that, I think we can start to give a voice to our tribe again, that we are a small tribe here in the Washington area. But if we connect and engage more, and not just in our own tribe, but other indigenous folks and other people of color in this area, we could have a mighty voice together. And then from there, even again, impacting trauma-informed practices in our medical fields, as well as in our mental health field. So that's kind of my vision of my future.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left here, so we can take some questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions that were sent to us before the event by Sharon Davenport, who is the treasurer for Crushing Colonialism. She's also the executive director for the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, which is Crushing Colonialism's fiscal sponsor. So she asked, will you please share the top 3 things that disability organizations can do to support Native communities? And then she also asked, how has the reproductive justice movement left out Indigenous issues, and what needs to happen in order to ensure Native communities are fully included? Would any of you like to answer that question, or excuse me, those 2 questions?
I was trying to, but my computer did something crazy, so I lost you all for a second. I can honestly say a lot of times when we look at things, like I even think of when Dr. Falsey talked a couple of weeks ago, and his focus was on the Black community. And I think too often, for instance, when we think of minorities, we immediately go to the Black community, which then to me X's out so many other communities, especially the Native Indigenous community and Native community, because they don't have the voice. Whereas we do tend to have a bigger voice in the Black community. So I think that is, oh, and I didn't say this is Mercia, by the way, but I think you all get, or everyone of color really gets lost in that development, because when they were talking about the COVID, it went to the Black community, but we're not looking at the Hispanic or Latin community. We're not looking at the Native community. We're not looking at the transgender community. All of those just kind of get exited out when we do that. And I think we have to get in a habit and saying minorities versus just immediately targeting the Black community when it comes to any kind of epidemic, sorry.
Lucia or Morgan, would either of you like to answer those questions?
Creo que es importante que podamos entender que la desarticulación de los pueblos ha sido también justo parte de los impactos del colonialismo y del racismo, de generar cierta división entre nuestros territorios, y que uno de los retos más grandes que tenemos que afrontar como pueblos originarios es ese, ¿no? El buscar la organización. En el caso de Latinoamérica y el caso particularmente de Guatemala, somos la mayoría los pueblos indígenas. En el caso particular de Guatemala, somos el 60% de la población indígena, y quiere decir que somos nosotros quienes estamos en los más altos porcentajes de desigualdad y de racismo. Es decir, uno de los múltiples despojos y genocidios es el tema del hambre y la comida, ¿no? Entonces, en Guatemala no hemos logrado generar articulaciones fuertes y grandes porque se nos la ha pasado, hemos pasado el tiempo en querer resolver las necesidades más básicas, es decir, hacer organización con necesidades básicas. El despojo a los territorios es grande, pero creo que una forma de buscar un ente articulador común es la lucha por la tierra. Creo que la tierra es un ente articulador que está justo en el centro de muchas de las cosas que necesitamos salvar, que necesitamos rescatar y que necesitamos ponerle toda la atención. Creo que la lucha por el agua, que los seres humanos estamos compuestos de agua y que necesitamos necesitamos del agua, es otra de las luchas de las luchas que nos pueden generar articulación, porque creo que es importante buscar esos puntos en común, esas realidades que vivimos como pueblos, para poder construir articulaciones mayores que nos puedan hacer disputar toda esa desigualdad que ha sido impuesta hacia nosotras y hacia nosotros. Entonces, yo creería un poco que iría por ahí. Ha sido bien complejo querer construir organización con los estómagos vacíos. Entonces, tenemos que resolver las necesidades elementales en las situaciones de pobreza impuestas que tenemos en el país. Entonces, creo que los retos son muy grandes, pero que no son imposibles, que sea a partir de la lucha por el agua y por la tierra. Gracias.
Morgan, would you like to answer that question?
This is Morgan. Being disabled Indigenous, like, we do get left behind, even here on the reservation, with basic accessibility to buildings that have services and we can't access. Plus, our people of our tribe ignores disabled people for events or does the minimum help. As far as reproductive justice, again, everything comes down to accessibility.
So I'll just quickly say, I'm sorry, this is Jen speaking again. Just kind of quickly trying to answer these questions that Sharon asked, because they are related to a lot of the work that I do as both a journalist and organizer. But some of the things that I think disability organizations, as well as the reproductive justice movement, need to be doing is, one, acknowledging the existence of Indigenous people. Sadly, when I look at the RJ movement and the RJ movement means reproductive justice movement, and I look at the disability justice movement, I don't see Indigenous people there. I don't even see a recognition of our existence. I mean, at best, we get a land acknowledgement at the beginning of an event, but we are not included in any of the organizing efforts. our needs are never addressed. There are not community, safer spaces created for us in conferences. I can say that for the 3 R's, originally those of us who organized this, we were trying to have the 3 R's hosted at an already existing sexual health and reproductive justice related conferences, and neither organizations would give us any support to bring it there. And that's just unconscionable. There's no reason for Indigenous people to be left out. So number one, just recognizing our existence, that's got to happen. 2, we have to be brought in, and not as an afterthought, not as an, oh, we realized we forgot our token Native, let's just bring someone on so we can say we're pro-Native, but we need to be at the table from the very beginning of any work. Because one, that table was made with our stolen resources and sits on our stolen land. And we have specific needs and ways of doing things that you can't just throw a Native in willy-nilly, after the fact. We need to be there from the beginning. And 3, these organizations need to be working for our rights. American Indian and Alaskan Natives in the U.S. have the highest rates of disabilities and chronic illnesses, yet I do not see us anywhere in the disability justice movement. And I can say for myself, I've reached the point where I sometimes feel like it's just pointless to try to be a part of it. It feels pointless to try to be a part of the reproductive justice movement. I don't see myself reflected anywhere in these movements. And I don't see many non-Native people who actually want to see Native people there. So that's just what I have to add to that. And I'm not letting my able and healthy, able-bodied Natives who are guilty of ableism as well off the hook. They got to start making space for their disabled and ill relatives. I'm real tired of not being able to go to a Native event because it's not accessible, or that I have to go hungry and can't eat because they didn't provide food for my dietary constraints, or even allow me to go get food at the beginning of the line. So then I have to wait till the line is gone because I can't stand for long, and then often there's not much food left. So this is a problem across communities and movements. So we have a question here. How can we join efforts with communities that are not connected with recognized organizations, but that today resist as Indigenous peoples? Lucia, would you like to start us off answering that question?
Bueno, creo que es una pregunta de esas preguntas que en realidad son bien importantes, porque ¿cómo podemos aunar esfuerzos? Yo creo que, como les decía hace un rato, la lucha por la vida es la lucha por la que estamos ahora, ¿no? La lucha por los ríos, por el agua, por la recuperación de los territorios. Entonces, yo creo que justamente esfuerzos como es una forma importante de poder juntar a gente de distintos pueblos, de distintos lugares, para reconectarnos con nuestras realidades originarias, reconectarnos con las cosas que nos tocan vivir. Y entonces esa es una forma de ir como haciendo tejido a nivel nacional y obviamente que es transnacional, que es fuera de las naciones, fuera de las fronteras. Creo que esa es una forma importante, como un primer paso, el poder buscar esos puntos en común que creo que en la conversación hemos encontrado. Creo que he escuchado en varios de los testimonios, tanto de Mercia como de Morgan, las distintas, y también contigo, Jane, de las similitudes de las realidades que nos tocan vivir como pueblos originarios, negros, indígenas. Entonces, pienso que esta posibilidad de juntar distintas historias, de juntar distintos testimonios y conversarlas y contarlas, es una forma importante de comenzar a aunar esos esfuerzos que más adelante con mayor organización, con mayor conversación, podamos buscar rutas que nos permitan generar acciones contundentes de cara a buscar quebrar el colonialismo, ¿no? Que creo que esa es una de las fuentes más importantes de este tipo de conversaciones, cómo articulamos acciones conjuntas en cada uno de los lugares donde estamos para seguir haciendo una defensa de la madre tierra y una defensa de la vida, porque de eso se trata, de vivir una vida digna y una vida en paz como pueblos y como mujeres indígenas. Gracias.
Morgan or Mercia, would you like to answer this question before we call it a day?
Sorry, Jen, I missed whatever you just said. I was tangled up because I was listening through my phone for the translation.
I understand. So I was just asking if you or Morgan would like to answer that question before we end the event here.
You know, after what Lucia said, I don't know if I could follow up any better. I think you're starting it. I mean, even through this dialogue, you've got me thinking, and even when you've been planning this, you've had me thinking, and so I think we've started that. You started, the juice is flowing. We've now started this conversation, and I think that, like Lucia said, is us coming together and continuing that dialogue, but then not just talking about it, really being about it. And moving forward with it, and not just here in the U.S., but, you know, knocking down the borders and all indigenous, no matter the continent, finding a way to come together. I mean, can you imagine that united voice? I think we'll start with pockets like this. So that's all. Like I said, I think Lucia said it perfectly.
Morgan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I do. This is Morgan. About this question, this in the water protectors and land defender movement, we had to learn quick that joining forces is more than putting indigenous people in the circle, but we have to lead, and this scares many non-native people. But it's good to learn how to be an ally and that it takes work. We don't need saviors. We need co-conspirators.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Morgan. This is Jen again. So that concludes the end of the virtual 3Rs, Realize, Recognize, and Reconciliation. We have our day-long version of the 3Rs scheduled for September 12th, 2020 in Washington, D.C. Hopefully the COVID-19 pandemic will be under control and we can hold it then. So just put that date on your calendar and know that we may have to reschedule again for the safety of our people and our communities. But you can follow us at crushingcolonialism.org. We're always looking for volunteers, and we have all kinds of things we can use help with, from graphic or web design to helping us plan events, you know, language translation, data entry. There's all kinds of ways to help us out. If you're interested, you can email crushingcolonialism@gmail.com. I also just want to give a quick plug on something that I'm a part of. Alice Wong of Disability Visibility has put together a book. She is the editor of the upcoming book, Disability Visibility, that comes out this summer. And I am one of the contributors in that book, and I think that it's really important, especially now that we are supporting our writers and our creative content makers and artists. So if you are somebody with means, please go pre-order that book. I believe it's just disabilityvisibility.org, and you can find the book there. And finally, events like this take a lot of resources, and as a very small grassroots organization, we rely heavily on donations from our followers and our community members. So if you are able to give, please go to our website, crushingcolonialism.org/donate. Any amount, excuse me, any amount is greatly appreciated. So I just want to give a final wado, thank you, to our panelists, Mercia, Morgan, and Lucia. I'd like to say once again that we're holding Grandma Velma Orvis, our now Métis ancestor, in our hearts, as well as Lorraine Clement, who is very close with her. So yes, that's it. And thank you to all of our translators, Paris and Rodney, who did ASL interpretation for us today, and for Roberto and Catalina, who did the Spanish-English interpretation. It's been interesting trying to figure out how to make this accessible for everyone in a virtual realm, and I'm very appreciative for them, as well as some of our volunteers and people who've been helping on the back end of this. And then also one final thank you to our sponsors, WOLA, which is the Washington Office on Latin America, the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, I think I just said that, Civil Liberties and Public Policy, the LGBTQ Task Force, the Diversity Fund, and the Campaign for Southern Equality. So with that said, we're going to end this. I've recorded this event, so it will go up on our YouTube channel. And once again, Wado, take care of yourselves.
Actually, can I just throw out there, I just want to wrap us up in prayer.
Yeah.
Send our smoke up. So I'm going to actually speak it in Algonquian first, and then I'll translate it in English. So however you honor your higher power, Kishlamin, Kimadaha, Welewanishi, Ahele, Akatakawana Kimel, Awanik, Luna, Kanataktak, Wele Napalan, Ak Tamakaleminen, Aholukin, Kishlamin, Wite Namai, Weneowakin, Aho. So what I said was, Creator, we come to you in a good way to thank you for the many blessings you bestow on us, and ask that you stand us up well and take pity on us during these difficult days. Please accept our sincere thanks. Aho. So since we are on Piscataway land, my people's land, I figure we should end it with our prayer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you to you all. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and keep crushing colonialism every day.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.
So thank you. Thanks a lot for this opportunity to show the reality of our countries, the reality we have to live in the Central America and in Guatemala. I'm very happy. I have a lot of troubles to the connection. Maybe I think if we can write some things and share with Crushing Colonialism, we can continue this discussion and that kind of stuff, because I think it's very important. So thank you very much, and see you in touch. See you in contact.
Bye, everyone.